Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and following along with the Month of the Military Child theme, I want to share a fabulous resource that I was introduced to by a good friend who is a military chaplain's wife. And this resource has a lot to do with resiliency and mental health and spirituality. And it's research that I was peripherally aware of some of the outcomes previously, but not aware of in its like how it originated. And I want to share that with you today. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. So, this week was supposed to be a guest episode with an interview, and it didn't work out because life happens, and I understand. So, we moved on to a plan B because being flexible is important. And that plan B was something I'd been working on for a while. And it is this amazing resource that I was telling you about before. It's The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. She is a doctor of psychology, I believe. Anyway, she is a psychologist. But anyway, it is absolutely fabulous. I cannot begin to explain how much I have absolutely 100% loved this book. Now, I'm going to give a total preface here. There is a lot of sciencey stuff in it, which I absolutely love and adore. Being a social scientist, having a degree in family life science, I find all of the research studies enthralling and fascinating, and I will probably geek out and pull up the actual research studies and journal articles and read them for kicks and giggles because I'm that kind of nerd and I love that stuff. I like going back to the source. But the thing I love most that she does is she takes all of that clinicaliness, which is fabulous and great and wonderful, and we will discuss, and then intersperses it with her life and her journey and how her life and her life experiences helped inform the science, how it helped lead her to these groundbreaking research studies and collaborations and experiences. And that is super fun and makes this book very accessible to the non social scientists out there. So, just for an average person, there is a lot that you can resonate and relate to in this book, and it makes it a more digestible read. That said, it's also not a super long book compared to some of the ones I've read. If you get the audiobook, it's a little over 7 hours, so not too bad. I would suggest get the audiobook and the physical, but that's just me. I like taking notes and highlighting things and all that, but listening to it, it's really not that bad. But then going back and referencing and remembering specific details, it's nice to have a physical copy. That said, let's dig into all of this wonderfulness that she shares. And she shares a lot of stories in here. And I'm going to hit on some of those things, but I'm also going to hit on a lot of the terminology and findings that she shares. Her research started off with working in mental health and assessing mental health and depression and anxiety and addiction and those sorts of things. And while she was doing all of that as an intern, she had a really amazing experience where she came to realize there's a third component to our psychology. Now, having a just being a conservative Christian who is a social scientist and having the benefit of coming after her, I did not realize how much of what she had pioneered in this in our field had led to the concepts I was introduced to in my programs and my studies at the collegiate level. And that said, she realized that and this was something that was taught and expressed in my classes, there's three components. There's the biological, genetic component, there's the environmental component, and then there's the spiritual component to us as human beings. And that spiritual component, so a lot of depression is treated with cognitive behavioral therapy or medication or different things like that. And those are great, but they don't seem to always treat or make a difference in some people's cases. And she wanted to start to figure out why. What else was there out there? What else could work when all of the clinical options that they were using were failing? Was there some other way to help people heal? And her journey through this process recognizes the spiritual component to us as beings. Now, this is an interfaith, cross faith, and not with a specific faith tradition factor. She's researched this in very broad terms. So when we talk about a spiritual component, we're not talking about a specific form of religiosity. We're not talking about a specific religious type of observance like Christianity or Judaism or Shintoism or Taoism, any of that sort of stuff. We are talking about a connection with a higher power or a externality of the soul. There's a lot that goes into this, but basically, due to the high rates of anxiety and depression in the military community, including military kids, I thought this was really quite an exceptional thing and would be beneficial to share with all of you. There's just higher rates of mental health struggles. And if we've got a tool, let's use it. Let's use what we have. So I'm going to go through some of the clinical research studies, some of the findings in there. If you want to read the fun stories, if you want to get the whole picture, I really recommend getting the book yourself. It is a fabulous resource. The results in these research studies are already being used in the military community. And she actually talks about that in the book, specifically in the chaplains program, and different chaplains that have used these situations and resources to help treat and better assist their soldiers and military personnel. This is not going to be something that is completely new to the military community. Evidently, these concepts are being conveyed to chaplains already. Hence why I probably heard about this from a military chaplain's wife, come to think of it. But the other thing is there are terms that she uses, and I'm going to do my best to define them to help you understand them. But basically, achieving awareness is one of the terms that she uses. Achieving awareness is a top down mentality where you use a focus to filter out your surroundings so that you are more productive. And achieving awareness is very goal oriented. And we've talked a lot about goals, and goal mindset is great. This is a wonderful thing to have. But living in achievement awareness only is not emotionally healthy. It can lead to a lot of depression and anxiety when you're not meeting all of those goals. But it filters out a lot of things we need to help buoy up our spirits and to keep us engaged and energized and connected to the world around us. And so that's when she gets into the awakened awareness. Awakened awareness is basically this spiritual recognition, this ability to recognize and have confidence in your ability to recognize these messages from the universe, to put it in a very succinct and non-religious specific way. Basically, the ability to recognize that the universe is sending you messages to encourage you, motivate you, and that you are not alone. And then she goes into, there's just a ton of research in here, and I'm going to just hit highlights. She talks about synchronicity, and synchronicity is one of the components of awakened awareness. And it's when the events in your inner and outer life are linked expressions of the same event, or when two or more events in your outer life are linked expressions of the same event. And your ability to recognize those sorts of things is important in awakened awareness. I will give you an example of this. I had experience in the past where I call them love notes from God. There were times where I would be feeling sad or depressed or lonely, and things would just happen that would help me feel more buoyed up. I would remember there was times in college where I just felt really just stressed out because of finals or studying or whatever, and I'd be walking out of the testing center at my university, and I would be walking down the path towards my apartment complex, and I had to go past this duck pond, and there was just flowers. And I remember, especially in spring, not so much not so much winter finals, but spring finals, I would notice that there were flowers blooming or birds chirping or the warm sun on my face. And those sorts of things would just help me to feel like there was something to look forward to, something to appreciate. That I still to this day, I love seeing the first flowers pop up in spring because they remind me of renewal. That no matter how cold and miserable the winter is, spring always comes. And just no matter how hard life is or what trials we're dealing with, there's a light always at the end of the tunnel. So that's one of those synchronicities that I've seen for me. So that is one concept she shares. Another concept that she talks about, they did brain scans because she wanted to see if there was a spiritual genetic component, if you could actually see in the brain this resiliency to depression and anxiety. And they did. They found that people who had a spiritual connection and a spiritual religiosity, their brain scans looked different. Even if they dealt with depression, they looked different than people who dealt with generational depression and all those things otherwise. So that there is a biological component to it all. In addition to that, in a research study done on the schedule of affective disorders and schizophrenia, they found that individuals with a strong personal spirituality at 26, 2.5 times more likely to have been depressed in the past. Spiritual formation doesn't stop depression. However, they were more likely to overcome it just because they had experienced it. On the other hand, strong spirituality at age 26, 75% protected against the reoccurrence of major depression in the next 10 years. So even if you had encountered massive depressive episodes, if you had a strong spirituality component in your life, you were less likely to encounter a major depressive episode again. And that is just incredible. And then going into this a little bit further, she talks about the quest orientation is characterized by a tendency to journey in life, to search for answers to meaningful personal decisions and big existential questions, to perceive doubt as positive, and to be open to change, or more accurately, open to perceiving the with fresh eyes, then using a new experience to fuel that change. So, another thing that they pointed out was that some of the same networks in the brain that are highly connected in a quest mentality, which is part of the awakened awareness, are dysfunctionally connected in depression. So, having that ability to look for change, to be open minded, to perceive all of those sorts of things, that there's meaning to life, just don't function in people with massive depression. So she breaks it down to awakened attention, awakened connection, and awakened heart are the three major factors in awakened awareness. My brief explanations of what awakened attention and all those are. Awakened attention is kind of like opening channels of perception. Awakened connection is the non-locality of connection or consciousness. And awakened heart is the alpha waves and altruism. And those are all just major factors. And sorry if you're hearing rustling of pages. I am referencing the book because I want to make sure I'm getting all this right for you guys. But I'm going to have to massively abbreviate what I'm going to share because I'm running out of time to fit it all into this episode. But basically, with the opening the channels of perception, she goes through different processes that they would use to help people understand and look at their life and evaluate things and find that openness and attention and perception. So they would have them do this like path, like write out the path of their life, like times that they've struggled, how they've overcome it, different things like that, and do that multiple points so that they start to get this concept of I can do this. This is, this is possible. With the connection, it's the non-locality of consciousness. And one of the places that she heard this discussed was with a scientist who was also a twin. And he talked about how there's always this like twinness thing that they've discussed but there's more to it than that. There was a research study done in Hawaii, and I really want to hit on this one because I thought it was fabulous. And it was at the North Hawaii Community Hospital, and it was where they had people was selected into two groups, healers and receivers, and they were split up. So they had them like talk and make connections and whatever, and then they separated them up and they sent them to different buildings. And then in the experiment, the healers each selected a person from whom they felt a compassionate bond, and these were placed in the receiver scanner. And so their brains were being scanned at the same time, and at random intervals, they would have the healers send out healing intentions, like healing thoughts, like focus on that person that they'd felt a connection with and send out these healing thoughts. And this is where I think it is absolutely incredible. 10 times out of 11, at the exact same time, the healers sent specific areas of the patient's brain, so the receivers, perceived locations of their brain indicated that they basically felt it. So even though they were in separate rooms, they were completely isolated. 10 out of 11 times when those individuals in a separate building were sending out these healing thoughts, these healing intentions, the brains of the receiver patient in a completely separate building responded on the MRI. Or is it EKG? Anyway, they responded. And so they could see that connection. We are connected human beings. We need that connection. We need that reciprocation from other human beings. And the energy and intents we send out really can and do manifest in some way we don't that there's not a completely scientific explanation for outside of the soul with other human beings. And so the next one is heart. And this is the alpha waves. So after she did that study with assessing the brains, she started to notice the Columbia study with the EEG. She asked one of the people, noticing that alpha waves are the same wavelength that give off in that part of the brain during meditating monks. And so she wondered if maybe alpha waves could affect that part of the brain in regards to helping disrupt depression and things like that. So she asked her research partner, and he looked into it, and he came back and he said alpha waves are everywhere. Specifically, alpha waves are everywhere in nature. And there was an additional study done, and this study found that basically if the more people were outside, they did a research study in regards to going on walks outside. And they found that people who went out for a walk in a natural setting in nature versus an urban setting actually had reduced depressive symptoms. And I was looking up the exact specifics and I couldn't find the exact specifics. I know it's here in the book somewhere, but I just thought that was so incredible. And there's more aspects that they went down, and they broke down this basically the 5 common spiritual phenotypes. And they went through these 5 common spiritual phenotypes, and they found the top 2 that actually affect your ability to overcome depression, and that is altruism and love of neighbor as self. And I thought that was just really awesome. So again, like I said, this is a really crash course, whistle stop run through, super fast take on a fabulous resource and book. She's got amazing stories in here. And I really would truly recommend this resource to anyone, especially anyone who is dealing with depression, anxiety, any of those sorts of things. And even addresses addiction and stuff in here. If you are dealing with any of those situations in your family or know someone who is, this is a fabulous and incredible resource. I absolutely love it. It has given me ideas on how to better interact and encourage some people that I love in my life who are experiencing hardship. So, again, super excited about this resource, considering all of the things that military children and military families experience. The one thing that is really easy to take away from this is, you know what? If you have military children in your life, be sending out those good thoughts. Be sending out, if you pray or meditate, whatever you do that and think of them with those loving thoughts. It obviously can do something. We just saw it in a research study. I mean, I've always personally felt that as a religious person, but hey, there's a research study for it too. And then another thing is get them out in nature. Nature is healing. And so those are 2 very practical things you can do if you know military children who are struggling. That said, I am working on continuing to find awesome resources and guests for you guys to participate in this and get you the best resources possible, as well as keep you up to date with what's going on in the world. And keep those comments coming. Please keep sending me feedback and ideas. I love to hear from you guys. Contact information for the podcast is in the description, as always. And if you want to contact me, you can contact me through X or through the email for the podcast. I love hearing from you guys. And with all of that said, just try to be the good that you want to see in the world, because that's really what is going to help the most. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife.